So SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, is coming up, and you can also choose dates in November and December. You can choose January, also February, from what I understand. Anyway, this was taken from a real SAT, and since there are copyright laws, we can only use a certain percent of it. And it's well under a fourth because if you read the original, there were about 6 paragraphs, and actually 6 to 9, and we're at like right at a fourth of it. So anyway, the main issue in present day social and political conflicts is whether or not man should give away freedom, private initiative, and individual responsibility. They're right here for you. So you have Maine right here in front of you. That's a clue. Private initiative, individual responsibility. Here's the rest of it. And surrender to the guardianship of a gigantic apparatus of compulsion and coercion, the socialist state. So the author has already made a statement by saying compulsion is like a socialist state. So if you want to write on your notes and in the column, coercion means that people are going to be in like this socialist state, and don't think too hard about the words like what you guys learned in political science and in history. Like, don't think, are they talking about like communism, or are they talking about an SS state like in Germany? Just think about what they're using to draw a connection from this specific SAT. So you go socialist, they are, it's a lot of reading, and I drew some X's over gigantic and apparatus because that stuff, that kind of writing is meant to confuse you. Okay, and it's just extra wordage. You can come back to it because it's scratched out. So don't let it get you too upset. The rest of the first paragraph is, should authoritarian totalitarianism be substituted for individualism and democracy? Should the citizen be transformed into a subject, a subordinate in an all-embracing army of conscripted labor, bound to obey unconditionally the orders of his superiors? Should he be deprived of his most precious privilege to choose means and ends to shape his life? So when they mention things like citizen and labor, they're already referencing things like forced labor. They're even beginning to get into class. And remember, we did have some citizens who were forced labor, who were slaves. So if you want to make that, if you want to go ahead and draw that inference, like it's just a general reference. You don't have to think of any particular class of people, since you've had slaves in almost every nation, regardless of race or color. You want to go ahead and try to draw these conclusions. Okay, and so you have it here. Obey, it's a big word, his superiors. Okay, don't get into anything else. This is added word, this is verbiage. It's added, it doesn't even matter. We're back here, should he be deprived of his most precious privilege to choose means and ends to shape his own life? Okay, so we made a broad link here. So if he gets orders and he takes them from his superiors, he's then deprived of his most privileged privilege to choose means and ends to shape his own life. Our age has witnessed the triumphal advance of the socialist cause. As much as half a century ago, an eminent British statesman, Sir Walter Harcourt, asserted, "We are all socialists now." At that time, his statement, I'm sorry, I'm trying to highlight this. At that time, his statement was premature as far as Great Britain was concerned. But today, it is almost literally true for that country, once the cradle of modern liberty. It is no less true with regard to continental Europe. America alone is still free to choose, and the decision of the American people will determine the outcome for the whole of mankind. The problems involved in the antagonism between socialism and capitalism can be attacked from various viewpoints. At present, it seems as if an investigation of the expansion of bureaucratic agencies is the most expedient avenue of approach. An analysis of bureaucratism offers an excellent opportunity to recognize fundamental problems of this controversy. And clearly, the essay didn't end here, but if you want to answer an essential question, you're already here now. So we can go on to the next, to what the question is, and I have this here, okay? Because we're going to go on and do the first passage. The author makes which point about socialism, okay, relative to capitalism. It gets confusing. So anyway, you're talking about like a socialist state. If there's compulsion, you guys remember this word, compulsory attendance. You have to attend a certain amount of days in school. Otherwise, your parents can get misdemeanors. So if they are under compulsion to do what they're supposed to do, if they're coerced, which means force, that means that an individual has to surrender to the socialist state. That means that they have to. So now they're going and making another leap here, and they're saying authoritarian, totalitarianism be substituted for an individual, and democracy, which, by the way, guys, you've already seen and had if you go into Hitler's Europe, if you go into Russia in the 1800s, like this kind of thing, authoritarian, totalitarianism already existed. So should the citizen be transformed into a subject is a question that is being asked, because if everybody has to take this kind of like, authority of the state to tell you what to do, like they did in Germany, at one time, certain books allowed, certain things, like extreme measures is what authoritarianism means. Of course, we have to have rules. But here they're talking about like really authoritarian is a key word for authority. But in this case, it's like extremity. It's an extreme rule. Extreme rule. It's an extreme rule that has to do with how something works. So we want to look at what all this is. We want to look at what all this is an extreme rule to how things are done and a state. And if the citizen is bound, they even use this word, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight that because they use the word bound to say, hey, you have to obey. You have to obey your superiors. You have to do what we say. And you become labor. So even though they state it outward here, they're actually kind of saying, here, they're kind of going backwards. They're telling you this word bound, they're saying obey, and then they're running this word back over to labor. And whenever you mention forced labor, you were talking slavery or indenture, okay, which we've certainly had in the United States. Okay, and also, I'm not just going to pick on the United States, we've had in other countries too. So this is what the question is asking you in circular reasoning. Are you talking about labor bound to obey orders of superiors? Should he be deprived of his most precious privilege to choose means and ends to shape his life? So they're saying if they turn you into a slave, you can't even do this. You don't have the privilege to choose a means and an ends to shape your life, and that is definition of a slave. So we don't have to get into any of these writers that talked about this. They mentioned one of the British writers, but this is really something that was up the alley for Karl Marx and a lot of other people, who are known, Immanuel Kant, all kinds of people. But anyway, this is what they're talking about. So it says in the first passage, and that's what this is, the author makes which point about socialism relative to capitalism. Socialism creates equality on incomes, but capitalism creates greater disparity in incomes. Now, here's the thing. When you read the rest of this passage, it's a former SAT, it does make this distinction, but they asked you specifically first paragraph. So see how they're trying, how like the test writers are seeing who's really a good writer, and in short, they're trying to trick you. This is specifically the first paragraph. So you don't even have to make that, because this was never said, and this wasn't said here. Never said here. Never said in the first paragraph. Capitalism is a foundational perspective of democracy, but socialism erodes the foundations of democracy. While this part is somewhat implied, do you see anything up here that says anything about capitalism? Let's go back and look real quick. Guardianship, authoritarian, totalitarianism, individual, democracy, socialist state. I don't even see capitalism. So why are we talking about it? So we're not. So scratch it out. Okay, now, socialism oppresses self-motivation, but capitalism allows individuals to retain their liberties. Did we get here? Okay. Capitalism allows individuals to retain their liberties. Did we say this? Capitalism allows? We're not into capitalism. This wasn't here. Okay, so this is out. So now you have socialism allows men to shape their own lives. You have capitalism allows men to shape their own lives, but socialism requires men to be conscripted to employment. And this is going to be your answer, because conscripted is another way of saying forced. Okay, so that's basically what this first paragraph is talking about. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you the entire essay, but this was it. This is what was being said, and we just went over question 1. Since this is about 12 minutes, we're going to leave this one, and then we're just going to upload the next set. Thanks for watching. Compulsory attendance. So this is force, and coercion, of course, is force. So you have 2 words there. Coerce, force. All right. You have a word here, bound. So if you look at it, bound to obey orders of his superiors. That's like talking about, and you have here labor citizen. You're talking about forced labor. So you have to argue backwards. Okay. Conscripted labor, that means force. That's a word here. So when we get ready to answer these questions, let's remember, please, that we're only talking about the first passage. Please, if you read this actual passage, I think it can be downloaded from, you can download it from like SAT. If you type in, like Princeton has a system, Princeton SAT, and then you type it in, you can download like because it comes before the review board. So if you type in SAT review board and you type in this, that just admit it, some companies got the dominance on that, and Princeton was one of them. So they have these actual SATs listed. So if you go to their website and if you go to SAT, real SATs, you can find some of these. I believe this one was from 2019. And again, we can only use so much. But anyway, you get ready to answer these questions. Here's the situation. If you read the entire essay, they actually do bring up question 1 and question like C. and they turn the words around so that the question comes up differently. So if you were to read socialism for choice A creates greater equality on incomes, but capitalism creates greater disparities, and this is in incomes. There should be a dot here. So what's going on here is that, in actual fact, the third or second paragraph says that, but it doesn't say anything about incomes in the first paragraph. It does say shape his own life, but they weren't talking just about incomes. They were talking about, the ability for you to have your own life and do what you want. So that's out, because nowhere does it mention income in there. And socialism creates greater equality. Be careful here, because over here it's arguing differently. It's saying it's a socialist state, and it's going to go here. You have to argue backwards and reason backwards, and your brain really has to get mentally tough and ready to think through this stuff and go into forced labor and do. Capitalism is a foundational perspective of democracy, but socialism erodes the foundations of democracy. Capitalism and democracy. Okay. They talked about authoritarianism and individual democracy. Socialism erodes the faces of being free. Maybe in some of the other paragraphs it got to that. B's out. See if socialism oppresses self-motivation, but capitalism allows individuals to retain their liberties. Socialism surrender to the gratis of the socialist state. So it oppresses self-motivation. Capitalism allows individuals to retain their liberties. So capitalism in there kind of suggests in the main paragraph that it's about, what others do as far as making money. But let's keep this one as a possibility, although we don't see capitalism in here. Capitalism allows men, should be one word, shape their own lives, but socialism also requires men to conscript others into employment. So this is arguing backwards. There's your answer, because it says it here. Okay? So the rest of the slides are going to be here. You can read through these. You can download these. This is one of the things here that, you have here when you're reading, doesn't get into the third passage, the problems involved in the antagonism between socialism can be attacked from various viewpoints. At present, it seems an investigation into the expansion, here we go again with these words, if you're reading through this afterwards, cross this out, of bureaucratic agencies is the most expedient avenue of approach. An analysis of the bureaucratism offers an excellent opportunity to recognize fundamental profits of this controversy, and it is controversial in general, but they want you to get into these two things, but they talk about it more so in the third paragraph. Over here, they bring it up for what it is. It's a social and political conflict, and those have always gone on because people have always talked about money. So when you're reading this, think about those, think of how they are, and if you do download it, you download anything like this, you're going to have this. And when you're reading, even in other SATs, witness a triumphal advance. The only reason this kind of word is allowed to go here and even should be here is because it's telling, if they ask you a question, how does the author feel about Sir William Harcourt's, address? And because the word triumph means great, you're going to automatically say, well, it means good. So that's all that is. That's just a keyword. And people who take SAT scores and get these 1400s and get these high scores, the reason that they, and even higher now, they're like 2100, 16, but 2100, 1600, the reason is because they're very quick at doing this. So just like an athlete who runs and who plays lacrosse or who plays basketball or whatever sport you do, you have to do the same thing with the SAT. Otherwise, it just gets really hard. So this is the rest of this, and just think about all the words that are here, and it's a lot of reading, constant reading. And the reason so many people do well on those are those people who are good readers and people who read this kind of stuff, which at the age of 16 and 17 most people are just bored with, but who do this and do a great job at distinguishing. That's who gets ahead on the SAT, if you're going to take it, because some colleges are not requiring it now. Anyway, download this at your will. Thanks for watching.